Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. I am back from New York, where the city is on fire right now because the New York Knicks just took a commanding 2-0 lead over the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA Finals, winning both of the first games of the series on the road. The Knicks look like a team of destiny right now. Everything is coming together. They're giving me 04 Pistons vibes. They're giving me 2011 Mavericks vibes, 2014 Spurs vibes. Everything is going their way right now, and this group is just coming together at the perfect time. As Elijah in the chat says, shout out to everyone who said San Antonio OKC Western Conference Finals was the real finals. I was guilty of that as well. A lot of people said that, but that was clearly wrong. And people who said that the Knicks had an easy path through the East, while that was partially true compared to the path that San Antonio had through the West, it ultimately didn't matter because right now the Knicks are 4-1 against the Spurs this season. And just like the Spurs had the Thunder's number going 8-4 against them this season, the Knicks are now 4-1 against the Spurs. And at the highest levels, sometimes it is a rock, paper, scissors dynamic. And the Knicks just present a ton of matchup problems for the Spurs. And some of the advantages that the Spurs have against the other 28 teams in the NBA, they just don't have against the Knicks. As a depressed Man United fan says, the power of friendship is stronger. Yes, the Villanova connection. But I mean, this team chemistry is off the charts. Like that is a real thing here that I think their continuity and chemistry is a big part of their success. But also, like on paper, there's a ton of talent there, right? And we'd seen versions of that over the last couple of years, and we had seen them make the conference finals before, but not quite get over the hump. Not only did they get over the hump in the East this year, I mean, they steamrolled the hump, right? They demolished the hill, the mountain. They got to the finals, and now they're up 2-0. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate the patience with me taking a week off. Had a video on Monday with Claire DeLune, who shout out to Claire. She was one of the few national media members who picked the Knicks to win this series. A lot of people picked the Spurs, but she was like we were going back and forth during our episode or right after talking through the finals, and she was completely right in her breakdown of the series. But shout out to Smokey, shout out to Justin, shout out to Tony, and shout out to TSC. All right, let's get into the game here. So we're going to pull up the box score. The Knicks win 105-104. This was a wild game. This had the makings of an incredible finish, and it did not disappoint unless you're obviously a Spurs fan. But New York took control of this game in really like end of the second quarter. They've been trailing for most of the first half. They closed the second quarter strong, go into halftime with a 4-point lead. Then they come out and really take control of the game early in the third quarter, get the lead to double figures. And there's a couple runs there from the Spurs, get it to 8 points, 6 points, whatever. But the Knicks, like one of the defining characteristics of this run has been their resilience, has been their ability to, no matter what type of run the opponent is going on, no matter if it looks like their momentum shaky, they always respond. And that has been one of the defining calling cards of this incredible run that they've been on now. They've won 13 straight games, second longest win streak in the playoffs in NBA history behind the 2017 Warriors. Like this is just historic stuff that we are witnessing right now. And so they're in control for most of the second half. They're up 14 in the fourth quarter. It looks like the game is over. And then San Antonio, in the middle portion of the fourth quarter, goes on a 14-0 run to tie the game and has a real chance to win this game if not for some costly mistakes late. I think about the Champagne foul on OG Anunoby, which to some degree is understandable because OG Anunoby is one of the best, if not the best, corner three-point shooter in the NBA, at least in these playoffs. And so, like, I mean, he's automatic from the corners. I understand the aggressive contest, but with the shot clock winding down, I think at that point, if he makes the contested three, he makes the contested three. But that was a dangerous contest and reach in there from Champagne, which resulted in him being out shortly thereafter for most of the rest of the way. And then Victor Wembanyama, like, they get the stop, and Jalen Brunson hit a couple shots down the stretch, but also had a few tough looks that he missed. He missed that the free throw, which I'm about to touch on. But Wemby gets the rebound, and just a grave mistake, the type of mistake that you cannot make on the biggest stage in the biggest moment with your season basically on the line, right? Like, it's teams have come back from 2-0 deficits. Teams have even come back from 2-0 deficits after losing both at home, but it is rare. And with how the Knicks have been playing for this entire postseason run and how they have matched up with the Spurs specifically, it's difficult to see San Antonio winning 4 of the next 5, with 3 of those 5 being in New York. So just a really costly mistake from Wemby. He gets the rebound, takes a couple dribbles, looks ahead to Stephon Castle, who Castle looked back for a moment, but then turned around and started to run up the floor. I think you could also look at Mitch Johnson and say he should have taken a timeout there, which I firmly agree with that take as well. But to me, that's on Wemby, because to the right, he had De'Aaron Fox, who, if you watch the replay and you look at it from like the sideline angle, De'Aaron Fox is clapping and calling for the ball. So in that case, I get Wemby theoretically like wanting to get the fast break opportunity, wanting to get see if there's an advantage in early offense, semi-transition. But Stephon Castle clearly like looked back, looked forward, and took a couple steps. Wemby made the wrong read there, throws the ball away. Jalen Brunson gets it. Then he fouls him. Brunson goes 1 for 2 at the free throw line. And then Wemby gets a solid look. I didn't love the final 2 possessions for San Antonio offensively. Like, I get the 2-for-1 opportunity where you have 37 seconds left. You don't want to give Brunson the final shot, so you go with a quick move there. Wemby's jumper was up and down tonight. Did have a much stronger second half than the first half, but I didn't love the just quick, rip it, one dribble, kind of side step jumper with 30 seconds left. And then the final play there, I thought Fox kind of got a step there, and I wondered if he was going to go for a floater or a little quick pull-up jumper, but kicks it back to Wemby, and really good defense there from Mitchell Robinson. But I didn't love 2 contested mid-range jumpers. Granted, with Wemby, a contest, it's not really in his line of sight, but just with how the game had been going, I thought Wemby's best offense had come closer to the basket. He did hit a couple threes. He did hit some of those jumpers in the elbow area. But overall, I thought he was and has been more effective closer to the basket. And there was we saw some of the dunks he had or some of the lob attempts. Like, I just thought that was clearly a more high percentage play. And I felt, I don't want to say settled there, because in the moment you have to take what the defense is giving you, and they were inviting that mid-range jumper, and he took it with less than 3 seconds left. So that was basically the game. But I felt like they could have, I don't know. I just feel like the Fox Wemby 2-man game, which has been part of, huge part of San Antonio's offensive success up to this point in the series, it just has not clicked, to the level that they need to against New York. They had some moments in the fourth quarter and certainly some progress during that 14-0 run, and some things I think the Spurs can build off of. But if you're the Spurs, like, because the crazy thing is, like, on paper, New York's up 2-0, right? And that is a commanding lead. And ultimately what matters in the playoffs is the results. You can go back to the Lakers and the 2024 first round series against Denver. It's like LA led over 70% of the series, but they lost in 5. And it ultimately doesn't matter how much you lead in terms of the percentage of the series or a half or whatnot. It matters if you win the game or not. And to New York's credit, San Antonio led over half of game 1. I think if you were just judging like who looked better between the two teams, San Antonio looked better for a majority of the game, and then New York pulled it out late. And then similarly here, I thought San Antonio had a stronger first half for the most part until New York pulled away. But then New York dominated the second half until that run. And then with like San Antonio had a chance to steal this one, really, right? With how convincingly New York was up in that second half and how great they were playing and the ball movement and the transition defense, the rim protection. I thought the rim protection tonight, like 6 blocks, but several more contests and altered shots, and like their rim protection from their wings and guards has been incredible in this series and incredible during their playoff run. But San Antonio had an opportunity to steal this one back and go back to New York, not feeling great, but at least being 1-1. And instead, it's now 2-0, and New York is firmly in control of the series and probably, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say sweep. I think San Antonio, with how close the first couple games have been, I think San Antonio will get at least one in this series, but it's looking like potentially a sweep, or I would say right now, probably a 5-game series. And then in the worst case for New York, maybe it's like a 6-game series, but then in that case, they get to win at MSG in front of their fans. But I mean, New York is, it's not over, right? Because they have not won 4 games yet, but New York has had San Antonio's number throughout this season, dating back to their NBA Cup matchup, right? And just some of the regular season matchups. They were the team to end San Antonio's 11-game win streak, and that has continued. And I think it starts first and foremost, not with Jalen Brunson, but with Karl Anthony Towns, who, if the series ended today, would be my choice for finals MVP. And that was something that I knew about the matchup problems he would present for Wemby, with being one of the best shooting big men of all time. But the Towns problem has been massive for San Antonio on both ends of the floor, where if Wemby's guarding Towns, that's taking him out of the fray and it's taking him away from his rim protection duties. But if he's not guarding Towns, then all of a sudden Towns is just straight up bullying the perimeter guys from for San Antonio, and whether it's offensive rebounds or it's just power drives and bullying them off of the dribble or bullying them in the post. Like Towns, it's this rare balance of finesse and skill and touch on the perimeter combined with power and physicality on the interior. And he's just been a matchup nightmare for San Antonio offensively. But then defensively, he's done an incredible job against Wemby. I think he's done the best job against Wemby that anyone has done in these playoffs. And you look at the version of Cat that the Knicks are getting, and like in theory, that was supposed to be the player that the Thunder were getting with Chet Holmgren. That was not the case in the Western Conference Finals. But the stretch big who could also guard like the differences in their games, but the premise is like a stretch big who could stretch Wemby out and then also guard him. That was supposed to be Chet Holmgren. It was not, but it is Karl Anthony Towns. And right now, I think he's been the difference, the biggest difference in this series. He has been the best player in this series. And in my opinion, he's clearly the finals MVP right now through the first couple games. That can always change. If the series shifting back to New York, Brunson has a couple big games in New York, and that tilts things into him being the finals MVP, then that's certainly possible. But I like my biggest reason why I picked the Spurs to win this series has actually played out, which was, for as great as Brunson is, I thought he was going to struggle against Stephon Castle. And just looking at the caliber of defender that he had been matched up with against I mean, Atlanta with Daniels, like Atlanta had some pretty good defenders, but just the overall defense, like they were picking a lot on CJ McCollum. There's no CJ McCollum to pick on for San Antonio. I think he was able to exploit some of the mismatches or some of the matchups that he wanted in that Atlanta series. But then looking at Philly, whether it was Edgecombe or Maxey or Oubre or whoever, and then to Cleveland with Mitchell and Harden and Dean Wade and Strus, like I just felt like the perimeter groups that he was going up against were nowhere near the level that San Antonio had defensively. And we saw what they did to Shea, and they're doing the same thing to Brunson. Like he has looked mortal through the first couple games. He has been below his standards, 11 for 30 in game 1, 7 for 25 in game 2. So he's 18 for 55 through the first couple games. If you're San Antonio, you take that. Like you have done your job for the most part against Brunson. The issue has been everybody else has had their moments of killing the Spurs. Tonight, Mikal Bridges had a huge third quarter and a couple plays in the fourth. 20 points, 8 for 13 shooting, 6.6 assists. Ball movement tonight for San Antonio. For New York was just incredible with the 29 assists on 37 shots. But OG Anunoby, I think more so in game 1, but did have some big plays in game 2, and also defensively has been incredible. Kat already mentioned. Josh Hart dealt with foul trouble, had 5 fouls, which limited him to just 18 minutes. But he had a huge game 1 performance and still had his moments, particularly defensively tonight, with that incredible block on Stephon Castle. Mitchell Robinson came in, made some free throws with the hack of Mitch, which we saw for the first time, and also made some big defensive plays, had a big offensive rebound. Landry Shamet continues to be one of the best role player shooters in playoff history. I think he's made he's 23 of his last 34 on threes, just shooting the leather off the basketball. And also I thought held up better physically and defensively tonight. Jose Alvarado has just been more of an innings eater for them in terms of running the offense, but he does provide, had a couple offensive rebounds, provides just an energy. And I mean, at least actually was tied for the team lead in plus minus, plus 11, tied there with Kat. And then Miles McBride partly closed the game, also gave them a couple offensive rebounds, hit a 3 and gave them a spark off the bench. So New York has just, I think their supporting cast has collectively outplayed San Antonio's supporting cast. The bench for San Antonio, Keldon Johnson has continued to struggle dating back to the OKC series. Dylan Harper has been amazing, and I almost consider him the 6th starter with San Antonio, and don't even view him through that lens. But the Cornet minutes have been a disaster. That has continued from the OKC series outside of his block in Game 7. Carter Bryant has not been ready for the moment. Harrison Barnes has been unplayable. So San Antonio is barely getting to 7 playable guys. I think Johnson, from a physicality, I'm playing 15 to 18 minutes a night, but I mean, this is the 6th man of the year we're talking about here, who's been reduced to a much smaller role. And then they've had to heavily lean on the starters. And Champagne has had a couple of, he'll hit a couple shots and then has been quiet, hasn't had the same rebounding impact. Brunson has really attacked him off of the dribble and revels in that matchup. Wemby, his first half was arguably his worst half of the playoffs, or in that conversation. He looked shook at times and was passing up shots, wasn't even looking at the basket. And I saw all the tweets at halftime of who replaced Wemby with Chet. Charles Barkley went at him pretty hard on the halftime show. Bounced back in a big way in the second half, scored 22 points, took 17 shots, and I think was ready for the moment in the second half up until late in the game with the turnover, and again, didn't love a couple of those looks. De'Aaron Fox bounced back in a big way after everyone was putting him in the trade machine and saying he should be moved to the bench. He was much better tonight with the 20, but Vassell, I think, has made an impact with his passing and rebounding, but hasn't quite hit a big shot in the fourth, but just hasn't quite been back to the level he was at, I thought, at times in the OKC series. And then Castle tonight, I mean, kind of grifts or flops his way into nearly injuring himself, but 14, 4 and 4. the 4 turnovers, had some brutal turnovers with misreading the defense and trying to hit that corner skip pass and getting it stolen. I think at least 2, if not 3 of his 4 turnovers were on that exact play of he gets downhill, gets the defender in jail on his hip, and is surveying the Knicks defense, tries to make that corner skip, and that gets intercepted. So he has continued to struggle with the turnovers in this matchup. So yeah, I mean, just it has not, like, the Spurs have done their job against Jalen Brunson. I think as we saw during that 14-0 run, they started playing him one-on-one more. And it's similar to the Shea matchup where when they doubled Shea, OKC made them pay with the 4-on-3s. When they doubled Jalen Brunson, New York has made them pay with the 4-on-3s. I think they're just going to have to play him more, straight up moving forward. But that aside, just role player for role player, the Knicks have been better. And it's been close, right? Like I think with the Spurs, it's a turnover here, it's a missed layup there, it's Knicks get an offensive rebound, kick out for a 3, Spurs get an open 3, miss the open 3. Like, it's just been all these little things that have added up to San Antonio now being down 2-0. But that's just how the playoffs go. And I think a lot of those things went in the Spurs' favor in the OKC matchup. But when it comes down to it, Wemby was the problem against OKC. They had no answer for him on either side of the ball. And they also had the physical advantages with their guards and perimeter players. It's been the inverse in this series. Cat has outplayed Wemby, and between OG Anunoby and Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges, even throwing in Landry Shamet, Miles McBride, like, those guys have held their own, if not won the physical matchups against San Antonio's perimeter guys, be it with blocks and contests at the rim, offensive rebounds, their collective shot making being better than the Spurs supporting cast shot making. It's just, it's been incredible to see. It's been a couple of really fun first games. That first game, it was a 1 possession game with under 2 minutes left, and even just over 1 minute left until Fox misses the jumper in the lane. He fouls. Give up offensive rebound. Jalen Brunson gets the offensive rebound, hits the 3 to go ahead. Then Fox misses the jumper. Then he fouls Mikal Bridges. Bridges makes the free throws. Wemby has the turnover. And then Brunson hits the shot over Vassell, which they actually ruled should have been an and 1. And that was game 1. But that one went down to the final minute. This one went down to the final second of the game. And so we've had a couple of great classic games through the first 2 games of the series. But we've seen, like, this New York team is connected at a different level. They have some advantages over San Antonio that they've been able to leverage, and the margins have just ever so slightly gone New York's way, and that's why they're up 2-0 right now. I don't think the Spurs are going to go down without a fight. I think the Spurs are going to get at least 1 in New York. I mean, I would say 1 in New York. I think it's 3-1 coming back to San Antonio for game 5, and then we'll see if they're able to extend the series and then probably lose in 6 at that point. But I don't think San Antonio is going out quietly. But the Knicks are, I think, going to win this series. And to me, it's just a matter of how many games at this point. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. Shout out to the chat. First one from Rando. Thank you for the super chat. They told Mitch Johnson it's winning time, but I think he set his watch to Eastern time. No timeout with 7 seconds left. Do you think they get a new coach? I don't understand why he didn't call the timeout. Again, I put it more on Wemby in that instance, just because you can't make that mistake. That's an egregious, inexcusable mistake. But certainly, I mentioned it in the moment, a little bit ago, that Mitch Johnson also had to call timeout there, right? And they did get the timeout with 7.5 seconds left after the Brunson miss, but they needed the timeout before that entire situation with 10 seconds left. No, I don't think they get a new coach. I mean, I was going back. I'm doing some off-season stuff for the Lakers in terms of reviewing some of the stuff I did last year and prepping that for some of my content next week. And going back, I looked at my West tiers, and I had the Spurs 9th in the West at this point last summer. Now, I was higher on them going into the season. I think I might have had them 7th or 8th, but still, like the conventional wisdom, and I was higher on them than some, because a lot of people had them 9th or 10th or borderline playing team, whatever. But like conventional wisdom was the Spurs were a playing team, and the fact that they won over 60 games and beat the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals that are in the finals. I mean, it's a testament, of course, at like the highest level to Victor Wembanyama and his greatness, and he's certainly in that best player in the world conversation. But Mitch Johnson has been a big part of that as well, and figuring out the ways to optimize the backcourt pieces and just the balance with those guys. And I think made a big gutsy decision midway through the season, or even past the midway point, of swapping out Harrison Barnes and swapping in Julian Champagnie to be the starting 4 for them. Barnes was a big culture guy, big leader in the locker room, but they needed to make that decision, and it took them to a different level. So no, I don't think, I mean, he beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like, could he have called a timeout there? Yes. Have there been some things I have not loved through the first couple games from Mitch Johnson? Yes. Were there some things I didn't love from him in the OKC series? Also, yes. But Mitch Johnson is one of the most promising young head coaches in the league. And to go from being a projected play-in team to winning 60-plus games, beating the on paper unbeatable Thunder, and going to the NBA Finals, I don't think you get fired after that. Peter, thank you for the super chat. As has been echoed here, Mike Brown is making a mockery of Mitch Johnson. No timeout on that Wemby turnover, barely playing Harper at the end of game 1. Yeah, the flip side of this is Mike Brown has been incredible, and I think his timeout management, like you saw a couple times tonight, San Antonio started a mini run and Mike Brown immediately called a timeout. Like I think that if I were a head coach, that would be more my style. Some coaches like to let their guys figure it out on the fly. I think you need to have some balance with that, right? You can't be like, you'll be out of timeouts if you're just calling timeouts willy-nilly. But I really like the way that he has managed the timeouts. I like the way that he has managed the rotation. I thought it was smart that he closed with that group of, it was Bridges plus the bench to close the third quarter. Remember, San Antonio had got it, I think, to like 4, and then they extended it to like 8 or 10 going into the fourth. Then he kept that group in to start the fourth. And there's been some flexibility with Mike Brown that I don't think he had earlier in his coaching career. And part of it, I think, was probably being in Golden State and learning from Steve Kerr and how Kerr kind of does things. Like I think you've seen some of that influence with him, but Mike Brown has long been an underrated head coach, and I think he's finally getting his flowers, and deservedly so. And the biggest difference between this year's Knicks and last year's Knicks, like there are some player differences, right? And in certain guys taking steps, whether it was Andrew Shamet or Cat's defense this season, and particularly this postseason, and just more continuity. And I think even Brunson's gone to a different level. But going from Tom Thibodeau to Mike Brown has obviously been the big upgrade that put the Knicks from a fringe contender, or at least like an East contender, to a likely NBA champion at this point. So yeah, but I think the Spurs are in a tough position right now because, or have been in a tough spot at times with the whole Fox situation, because I agree with you. I think if we are ranking the Spurs guards in the playoffs, you could argue, I would say Castle's been number 1, Harper's been number 2, and Fox has been number 3. And that's before we even mention, like, are we considering Vassell a guard or a forward? He technically plays more of like the 3 for them, but you could also argue he's more shooting guard size, right? Like he's 6'6", slender, athletic. He could play the 2 or the 3. If you put Vassell in there, you could also argue Fox has been like number 4, like he's somewhere between number 3 and number 4, but he's getting paid number 2 level money at the 50+ million, and was the Spurs second All-Star this year. Like on paper, he is the number 2 behind Wemby. And he's also the guy among that group that actually has playoff experience. Not much, but he had been to the playoffs before and lost in 7. So I think there's like a political element here that I talk about it all the time. I talked about it with the Lakers during the season, whether it was like Rui starting or benching, Rui getting benched at the end of game 4 with Austin and LeBron there and like not wanting to bench one of those 2 guys. Like there is a political element at times for coaches and just how guys are going to take certain decisions. And I think now to his credit, he did play Harper. Harper played 32 minutes tonight. I still think that's a little too low. To me, he's been their best overall guard. Did a pretty good job on Brunson in the fourth quarter, I thought. But yeah, they're in a tough spot because I think like Vassell also has some seniority and some equity with the organization. Like he's another guy that they are reluctant to bench as well. And then, Castle tonight, between the foul trouble, some of the turnovers and the late injury, he ended up having his minutes slashed, but it has felt like Castle and Fox and Vassell are the mainstays. And then they go between Champagnie and Harper. And if they go with Harper, then they are a little bit smaller there because Vassell is more of the 4 in that case. I think it should be more of a meritocracy, more matchup based. And I mean, to me, honestly, I would have Castle and Harper as my 2 locks, and then the other 3 guys vying for the final 2 spots. But yeah, I mean, I certainly think that Mike Brown, like the flip side of the Mitch Johnson conversation is Mike Brown deserves his flowers, and he has coached the hell of a series. And Peter follows up, if New York wins the chip, Becky Hammon should apologize. The New Yorkers are coming for Becky Hammon. I can say, yeah, I think she will. I think she will. And then Peter follows up, thank you for the super chat. Didn't get your analysis of OKC San Antonio because of your break, but OKC would have won if Jay Will/AJ would have played. San Antonio caught a huge break with those injuries. I agree. I think it probably would have had to have been Jay Will because AJ, and I don't know how much the AJ stuff had to do with the injury. I think it was partly related to that, but he did not play well in those first couple games. So I don't know if AJ would have been enough. Maybe he would have been enough. I don't know. I think Jay Will would have, like, what so I was wrong on that series. I had OKC in 7 and it ended up going San Antonio in 7. Part of that was banking on Jay Will and AJ being a part of that. And I think if those guys were both healthy, or if at least Jay Will were healthy, I do think the Thunder end up winning that game in, winning the series in 7. So San Antonio did catch a break, but let's not forget that Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox were also dealing with injuries. Now they were able to play through those injuries. So there's a difference in having the guys available, but somewhat compromised versus just not having them at all. But De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper were also not themselves in that series. So I would have loved to have seen just full strength, both squads going up against each other. I think the full strength versions of both teams, OKC is slightly better, but that we saw San Antonio win the series. So San Antonio won the series, and they deserve a ton of credit winning a game 7 on the road in that hostile environment in OKC. That was that's where I think there's going to be some people that jump to like the youth, and like I think there was an element of youth and inexperience playing a role at points in this finals, but I don't want to use that as like the blanket excuse here, because a team that suffers from youth and inexperience and mistakes like that doesn't win a couple games in OKC and win a game 7 in OKC in the Western Conference Finals. Like I just reject that premise. Now, certainly, again, I think there are elements of some of these mistakes are going to be learning lessons for San Antonio moving forward, but I reject the premise that like this is some young team that doesn't know what to do, because I think they've already, I don't think they win that OKC series if that were fully the case. Now, have there been some young team mistakes here? Yeah, I think they have some things they'd like to take back, I'm sure, from both of the crunch times of the last couple games. But a huge, deserved shout out for them for winning that game 7. Which, by the way, the two games. So game 7, OKC San Antonio. Game 1, San Antonio New York. I watched game 7 in a bar. Game 1 at my brother. My brother lives in New York. My brother's friend's apartment with a big group of people. And I typically do not watch games in crowds or with people outside of course, like going to games, but I'm in work mode. I'm locked in on the game. Or if I'm not at the game, I am watching it often on my TV or my computer or whatever. And it's like, don't bother me. I'm locked in. But I will say, watching it at a bar with a bunch of people, everyone I can say was rooting for San Antonio to win that game in game 7, San Antonio, OKC. The entire bar was just going crazy every time San Antonio scored, and that no one wanted OKC to win. And I think there's a lot of that energy out there in general, but that clearly applied to game 7. But we'll say, it had been a minute since I'd watched a game with just having a beer and not really being focused on the analysis or whatnot. And that was a fun experience. Pleasers, thank you for the super chat. Knicks winning the chip really means the March 2026 Lakers are the analytical champs. LOL, can't compete with OKC San Antonio, but it really is all about matchups. Yeah. And I would recommend that all of the Lakers viewers go back and watch my episode from earlier in the week, if you have not done so yet, where Claire and I talk through what the Lakers can learn from each of the 4 conference finalists. We agreed that there wasn't much to take away from Cleveland, but the from all 3 teams quickly. With OKC, it was their depth and versatility. And of course, you're not going to build as deep of a roster as OKC because they're uniquely set up with all of their youth and guys on rookie scale contracts and cap flexibility and assets that they were able to build their roster the way that they did. But OKC could go 2 big, it could go single big with a variety of bigs. It's a much different look if Isaiah Hartenstein's your 5 in a smaller group versus Chet at the 5 or J-Dub at the 5. It could also play 2 big looks with Chet and Hartenstein or Chet and J-Dub. And they could even go small, which we didn't really get to see with J-Dub being, J-Will, not J-Dub. But with J-Dub being out, we didn't really get to see the small ball look. But there is a version of OKC where they go J-Dub, Shea, Dort, Caruso, Wallace, something like that. Or Kenrich Williams, Aaron Wiggins is in there, whatever. And they could go with a smaller switch everything 1 through 5 group. So that's one of the things that LA can, I think, take from OKC or try to take is that LA did not have a lot of versatility or variety within their looks. There was no 2 big look this year. And even the small ball we saw randomly, but it was more so JJ was giving up on the center spot and saying we can't play our centers, so we have to. It was more out of necessity rather than an actual look or wrinkle that the Lakers incorporated into their rotation. So I think that's something that they could take. With New York, it's everyone piling on Brunson and Cat, who have both held up well, in this postseason run defensively. But it is okay, if you're going to have a 6-foot point guard and you're going to have a center who isn't a traditional defensive anchor, you need to flank those guys with a bunch of tough 2-way wings that are long, athletic, strong, physical. And they did that with OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart and even Deuce McBride off the bench. And even a Mitchell Robinson as sort of the antithesis of Cat, this big, burly, physical, big man. The Knicks have flanked their stars with defensive-minded, tough, physical, 2-way role players. And I think the Lakers, that to me is the one that if you're going to go the Luka Austin route, you need to try to copy the Knicks. You're not going to copy the blueprint because there's not an OG Anunoby out there or Mikal Bridges out there, but you need to try to surround those types of guys, or try to put those types of guys around Luka, around Austin, if you're going that route. And then with the Spurs, I'm blanking on, I think with the Spurs, it was more so, now I'm remembering it, it was more so like the continuity within their rotation. So I think they had a lot of overlap with, like they run a lot of the same stuff regardless of who's on the floor, and they can mix and match. So they got the 3 guards, which they can put 2 of those guys together, 3 of those guys. They got their wings who all kind of fill the same role. And then Cornet is obviously not Wemby, but at least in the regular season, he's a fine innings eater and was statistically one of the better rim protectors in the league. So there is this element with San Antonio of, it's almost the inverse of OKC, where with OKC, they kind of have a answer for everything you throw at them, unless it's Wemby. With San Antonio, it's like, we're going to play our style and we're going to try to have as much continuity within our approach and within our lineups in terms of, we're generally going to have like 1 big, 2 bigger forward, wing types, 2 guards, and we can mix and match with these general archetypes. And I think there's a lot of overlap with San Antonio that way. So that to me would be stuff that the Lakers can try to take from those teams. But yeah, I mean, according to Kenny Atkinson, the Lakers are actually the analytical champs here. Peter, all right, I was waiting for this. Let's get into the Austin stuff. Yeah, I'm surprised it took this long. So Peter asks, what do you think of Brad Turner's report that Austin will be demanding the max from LA? Is it just posturing from his agents? So my take on this is, I'm not surprised that Austin will be asking the Lakers for the max. I think it would be a dereliction of duty from Austin's agents and Austin to not be asking the Lakers for the max. Of course you're going to ask for the max. Like that, I don't know why that was as surprising or shocking to some as it was. I think it like when you're negotiating in there, you don't, if you're up for like a job opportunity, you're not, they say there's like a range on the salary. You're going to ask for the highest range of that salary. Like that's just basic negotiation. And especially with Austin having to have taken a pay cut on his last deal. Like if Austin had been on an open market, Austin would currently be on, I think, a mid to high 20s deal right now. And he'd be making double the amount of money that he has been making. So Austin already was forced to take a pay cut because of the arenas provision. So it makes sense that he would ask for the moon. And again, I also read the Brad's comment as more, I would say, informed commentary or speculation. I didn't take it as like ironclad or him officially saying like, I know this to be true, but more so like Brad has sources and Brad has been covering the Lakers since the 80s. So Brad's been covering the Lakers since before I was born, like to give you perspective of how entrenched Brad is with the organization and how long he's been covering that. But still, like I don't, because I think if he was actually reporting that, it would have been reported in the LA Times. Like as someone who is on the side of it, it has gotten in trouble before for certain things I said on this show or in other interviews with, when it would be like, well, why didn't you report this first? You got to be careful there with what you say. So I felt that was more Brad's informed speculation or commentary on the situation. But again, I'm not surprised. Like, of course, Austin would ask for the max. I don't think that that should be obvious. Now, whether he's going to get the max is an entirely different conversation and will partly be determined by the interest from Chicago, Brooklyn, or potentially a dark horse suitor. There could be a team that clears some cap space and gets involved. What I will say is, I've been saying for the past month or so, I think the most likely outcome, in my opinion, is something along the lines of a 5-year, $200 million deal, which would be a $40 million average annual value. You could structure it to be a descending contract. So maybe it starts off, the most Austin can make this upcoming season is $41 million, I believe. So you could structure it with like 41 and descending. Now, if it is going to be an average annual value of around 40, that would obviously be sort of in that 40 range in general. I don't know what I think the max is 41. I don't know that off the top of my head, but you could do some sort of descending contract where it's a little bit higher and then it descends. It could also be a little bit under that 200. Maybe it's 180, 190, but I think somewhere in that range, I would peg it closer to 5 years, $200 million. And what that does is it's lower average annual value than the max he could get from the market, which is 4 years, 178 million. That's about 44 million average annual value. But you say, hey, like take a little bit less per year, but we give you the fifth year, and that, so you're getting more guaranteed money. You're getting the extra fifth year, and your salary is lower than what it would be for another team, but you get to stay in LA. You get to be part of a winning situation. You don't have to go rebuild in Chicago or Brooklyn or wherever. I think that's where this ends up. He had because if he gets the 178, I think at that point the Lakers have to at least match that. And then if I'm Austin, I might prefer the fifth year and then be like, hey, I'll take less money per year if you give me the fifth year, but that fifth year, just gives him more security. Maybe it's a player option or whatever. But I think this ends up being closer to 5 years, 200. I don't think it goes full max, but I also think the people that have been throwing out like 150, 160, if the Lakers are offering even 150, 40 years, 150 or 160 or 150, 160, I just think that's too low and Austin will get more money elsewhere. So, as for the hometown discount thing, I think there will be some sort of it's probably similar to LeBron to a degree in the sense of like you have to sell him on the vision of not just like we're running it back and we have the same roster and like we're going to do X or Y with the this is the vision for the roster. But as I've said repeatedly, ultimately Austin's 2026-27 salary has nothing to do with the Lakers cap situation because they're going to be operating with him on that cap hold. So whether they pay him 30 million or 40 million or 20 million, whatever it is, like it's not going to impact whether the Lakers have more cap space. Now, if his contract impacted whether they have more cap space, that's a totally different situation, but that only applies if he leaves. But in that case, they only get $20.9 million, which you're not, maybe you're getting in the conversation for Ayo Dosunmu, but I think you're going to have a worse roster at that point. So I'm not surprised by the report. I think there is some level, we had Eric Pincus, Bleacher Report, come out with a projection, and he's pretty tied in with the Lakers front office of like 35 million for Austin. Then you have that followed up shortly thereafter by Brad Turner with his report of Austin asking for the max and not wanting a hometown discount. So that could be its own version of posturing or public negotiation. I think if you just take those two at face value, like Austin getting his max from the Lakers is 48 million per year average annual value, from another team is 44. And then that Pincus number of 35, somewhere in the middle of that is around like that 40-ish mark, which is where I think this ends up. If the Lakers are starting out, we want it, in the low to mid 30s, and Austin starting out, I want mid to high 40s. The natural middle point is somewhere in that $40 million range. So that's where I think this ends up, somewhere in that 5 years, $200 million. I guess 160 could be its own version of a compromise, but you are opening up the door for another suitor could come in and offer $20 million more if it's a 4-year deal. So I continue to say 5 years, 200 is my prediction for this, but I was not surprised by the situation. I was not surprised by the backlash and all the controversy and all the commentary post report, but I think this is par for the course with the negotiation, and we're less than a month away from free agency. So I do expect both sides to come to an agreement. Next one from Rando. Thank you for the super chat. Does Cat's success make you reevaluate Turner's value? I feel like he's an extremely smart player who can stretch the floor despite his flaws. So I don't want to spoil. I'm going to be doing a ton of offseason content over the next 2 weeks. I've been ramping up for this. This is my version of the playoffs. So I'm going to be doing a center list in terms of free agent targets a center list in terms of trade targets and then an overall center list, combining those two and my overall center rankings. Now, what I will say about Turner is I'm going to be doing a top 15 across free agent options and trade options. I think I have Turner 12th right now on that list out of 15 guys. But if you look at the 11 guys ahead of him, it's like, not to spoil it, but I have Walker Kessler and Jalen Duren on the list. And both those guys, I think, are relatively unrealistic for the Lakers. They're both restricted free agents. And then I have a Jared Allen on the list or guys like that where theoretically they can be available, but there's a lot of moving parts with Cleveland. What are they? Are they in the mix for Giannis? Are they in the mix for LeBron? Are they in the mix for someone else? What do they do with Jared Allen? There's a lot of questions and contingencies that you quickly go down that list, and it's like, of the 11 guys I have ahead of Miles Turner, maybe 3 or 4 of them are gettable, I would say. So when you actually whittle down the list, he's closer to the top of the list, I would say, in terms of realistic and gettable targets. What I'll say about Turner, though, compared to the rest of the list, is I've broken everything down statistically, and I have it color coded with reds and greens based on comparing the centers to both each other and just the overall center position in terms of stuff like rebound percentage, block percentage, estimated plus minus, box plus minus, a bunch of different statistical things. There's a ton of red for Miles Turner coming off of last year. And I mean, you can make a case that I have Misi on the list. You could make a case that outside of Misi, Turner's by far clearly the second worst player statistically on the list. And so I have that, I say all that to say that I'm still largely out on Turner, and I'm out on Turner for a couple of reasons. If you think about what the Lakers need from the center position, I think a lob threat and pick and roll partner with Luka is the primary thing offensively. And then I think that player ideally is a rim protector. It'd be great if they could check every box defensively. They're versatile. They could switch all these things. But I think at a minimum, they need to be a rim protector. Then they also need to be a stellar rebounder. Turner checks I guess 3/4 of the rim protector. He's still a good shot blocker, but some of his rim protection numbers have dipped and did not have a major impact on Milwaukee's defense this year. Not a good rebounder. That's been one of the limitations with him for his entire career, which means you now have to compensate with for example, DeAndre Ayton averaged 8 rebounds per game in 28 minutes. Turner's not doing that in 28 minutes. So now you have 2 to 3 rebounds per game. You need to find a way to recoup. And already the Lakers were at times a shaky defensive rebounding team. Think about a lot of their big losses were giving up a ton of offensive rebounds and getting punked in the paint. They're 29th in defensive field goal percentage allowed at the rim. So Turner, to me, does not check the lob threat, pick and roll partner part of it. He is a pick and pop threat, but I don't think you want, I just think a Luka offense needs a lob threat. And so you could balance it. Do you get Robert Williams? Do you just play Jackson more? Sure, but you're starting games with Turner in that case, and theoretically you're closing games with Turner in that case. I just think it's a much different geometry with the floor having ideally you have a lob threat and a stretch big in the same player, but Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren, Cat's not really a lob threat, but you have that interior force with a outside force in the same player. That's not Miles Turner. So to me, it's he's not a lob threat. He's not really an interior guy offensively. He's not a rebounder. And I think he's lost his fastball defensively. Still a solid to good defender, but not the level he was at a couple years ago. I also look at the playoffs. I thought he was sneakily bad at times during the postseason. He didn't have a good finals. He was not good against OKC. That was part of the reason why Indiana was taken to 7 games. I think they could have potentially won that series in 6 games if Miles Turner's better in that series. So with 3 more years left, and I think his average annual contract is $28 million over the 3 years, I'm still out on Miles Turner. I get the theory of him stretching the floor, but if you want to compare him to Cat specifically, 1, Cat's a better shooter. 2, Cat's a better high volume shooter. 3, Cat can take guys off the dribble, attack closeouts. 4, Cat is stronger, more physical, which is not something I'm used to say with Cat, but he's proven that this postseason. And we've seen like he can bully ball, mismatch hunt, and attack smaller guys in the post, off the dribble, in the paint. Turner's not really doing that. So I just think Turner checks the box specifically of a stretch 5, but you need to surround him with good rebounding. You need to surround him with, you almost need like a different front court player to be a lob threat at that point, or you need to like split his minutes with your backup. I just think he complicates things, in my opinion, too much. So would I rather have Miles Turner than DeAndre Ayton? Yes. I think DeAndre Ayton, we saw the ceiling. The ceiling is DeAndre Ayton cannot play against San Antonio. He cannot play against OKC. If the Lakers have DeAndre Ayton, they can win a playoff round. They're not going any further. So at least Miles Turner has been to the finals as a starting center with like a recent version of himself. I would rather have him than DeAndre Ayton, but there are 10 to 11 centers that I think are like reasonably gettable to some degree that I would rather have than Miles Turner. So he's much lower on the list, but if you can't get any of the other guys, I'm open to it, especially if you could get off Vando. I think that would be a big contingency for me. It's getting off Vando in that trade. And then LA 824 LDR. Thank you for the super chat. We've seen Luka with Brunson and Reeves, but not with the Cat level big. Watching the Knicks is Luka's best championship co-star, actually an elite offensive center. I like that. I think you could throw Kyrie in there as well. Maybe. I would say, I mean, I've talked about this recently, but I think Austin's role on a championship level team is more of a number 3 than a number 2. And so to me, I actually think you could go one of two ways with Luka's number 2. It's either center or a wing. So to me, it's either, to your point, the Cat type, or it's the Jaylen Brown type, like a legit 2-way stud wing. Like I think Jaylen Brown is one of the guys that would be the best possible complement to Luka, just based on his style of play and his defense. And so like, I think you could go one of two ways with that, either the stud 2-way defensive wing or the center. But yeah, I think if you are, I still think the Reeves archetype, which you've seen with Brunson and Kyrie, is important next to Luka, but I think the hierarchy should be Luka, a center or a star level center or wing, then Austin, and then another high level starter, and like that's your top 4, and that. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And now finding like none of the bigs I'm talking about. I mean, this is to some degree, not to go down the Giannis path, but like this is in some ways the argument for Giannis, because even if we think about like, would Giannis hold up better against Cat right now than Wemby would? I think so. I think Giannis's physical, because I think to some degree, it's Cat has just been able to push Wemby around and like hold his own in a way that Isaiah Hartenstein was able to do at times in the conference finals, especially in that game 2. But Chet was obviously not able to do, and I think even a guy like Gobert can't really do. But I think Cat has done it, and I think Giannis could do that. So I don't want to go down that path again, because there are a ton of drawbacks to the Giannis situation and just the depth of the roster and what it would take. And even then, the Lakers, I don't even think have a top 5 offer for Giannis, unless Milwaukee just really wants to get off of a bunch of money. I mean, maybe they throw Miles Turner in the deal. It's like this mega deal where Lakers have to, they have to move a lot of money around to make that work. But point being, like I think there is something here in terms of Luka's best number 2 option is probably a front court player, whether that's a wing or a big man. I do agree with that premise. Just that Dolph says super high on Peyton Watson now. Yeah, I I think if there's any way to add Peyton Watson or Walker Kessler, then I think you have to do that. Or Jalen Duren. I would, any of those two. Brian Farmer asks Durant to San Antonio if they lose in the finals. I don't think so, because I don't know if I'd want to throw that. To be completely honest, I don't know if you want to throw that variable into the locker room with a lot of the stuff with how stuff ended in Brooklyn. I mean, go back further, how stuff ended in Golden State to Brooklyn to Phoenix to Houston. He does not scream San Antonio player. So, I mean, if it was a situation where it's like Fox and picks for KD, and you go into next year with Castle, Harper, KD, and then Champagne or Vassell as your fifth starter, and then the other one comes off the bench, and then your bench is now, I mean, your bench is taking a hit because you're moving Harper into the starting group, but then you have you look to add another solid guard, and then your bench is that guard plus Johnson plus Champagne or Vassell plus Cornette, and then Carter Bryant continues to develop. Like I like that top 10, but I would not want to throw Durant into this. Like I do think there's I think at some point in the near term, they will need to move off Fox, and the best version of this group longer term might be some version that has a different player in place of Fox. And it's going to be Castle and Harper are the backcourt of the future. You have Johnson and Vassell and Bryant with Wemby, and then you maybe upgrade the Cornette spot, add another high-level forward, and that's like the team of the next few years. But for now, I would stay away from Durant. Marcus asks what I think of Pelle Larsson. I like him. I mean, I think he's clearly a bench player, but depending on what, like if he's just free, I would take him for sure. Depending on, it just depends on what the cost is. And then final one here from Civic Citizen. What would be the argument to trade for Christian Brown? The argument for me would be, well, Cole says another Miami Heat guard. Yeah, you probably want to stay away. This is a really, and then another one from Brian Farmer. Would you rather have OG or Dylan Harper on your team? Right now, I'd rather have OG. OG is better than Dylan Harper. Longer term, Dylan Harper. But Civic Citizen said, what would the argument be to trade for Christian Brown? I think the argument is that he had a down shooting year and that you're potentially buying low. Like I would even, buying low is tough because that suggests that he's going to bounce back to being like, that's probably a bad contract, that he's a little bit overpaid. He's probably more of a high teens to low 20s type guy at his peak rather than a mid 20s guy at his peak in terms of, millions. But if you look at his career, last year or this past season, he shot 30% on threes. The 3 previous seasons, he shot 35% as a rookie, 38%, and then 40%. So it was basically a league average shooter as a rookie, and then 2 years above league average, including that 25 season when he stepped into a full-time starting role and was a 40% three-point shooter. I doubt he has another season shooting this low. Now, does he maybe stabilize as a average to slightly below average three-point shooter? Potentially. But I think the key thing would be betting on him bouncing back as a shooter, because if you look at the rest of his game, I think there was some defensive slippage. He was not quite the same level of defender. He was not as involved offensively, also played a little bit less. But with the emergence of Peyton Watson, with a deeper bench, with guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., Bruce Brown, there was just more overall competition. And combine that with having a down shooting season, and it's natural that he's just not going to put up the same number of just statistics and just not be viewed the same way. But if you go back to the previous season, 2024-25, he breaks out in a major way, averaging 15 points a game, 5 rebounds, nearly 3 assists, over a steal, shot 58% from the floor and 40% on threes. Now, is that maybe an outlier performance for him? Potentially. It's by far, like this year, he shot 52%. So in rookie year was 50%. So he is like 3 of his 4 years, he's been 50% or better on overall. And then again, we already talked through the 3-point numbers. So I think there's a possibility here that he's also dramatically improved as a free throw shooter the last couple of years. So like I would say he's a good by shooting guard standards, he's a good rebounder. I think he's going to bounce back as a shooter. I think he's an above average to solid defender, not quite elite, but so I would say like he would not be my first choice for the Lakers. We'll talk through that over the next few weeks. I'd rather have a Herb Jones, for example, right? Lou Dort. I think I'm lower on Lou Dort than most, but that one, like Dort's a better defender, but I think Christian Brown's better offensively. So you got to make that calculus there. But there are guys that I'd rather have in that position. But if it comes down to it and you're spending on the center spot and you need some perimeter help, like I think you could do worse than Christian Brown. Now, I do not love the contract. And for some, I think that's a non-starter just because of the contract. I totally understand that. I just think this is a dude who is 25 years old, not even in his prime, has shown to be a starting level guy on one of the best teams in the West and had a really rough shooting season, but I would bet more on the history and the body of work compared to just this season. Now, again, even go back to last year, like it's like they paid him the 25 betting on him taking another step and he didn't take that step. So I still think even if he's the player he was 2 years ago, that's not really a $25 million player. It's borderline. So you're still probably at like a slight net negative with the contract, which is its own thing that you have to negotiate. But for example, like would I rather have Christian Brown or would I rather have Vando, DK, and Jake? I'd probably rather have Christian Brown than those 3 guys. So it depends on the alternatives here. But or even, I mean, I don't want to say rather than DA, but like if there's a way to get off of, if you could get off like Vando, DK, and then DA or Jake and get Christian Brown. And in this case, it's probably a 3-team trade because Denver's not going to want to take on some of that salary and whatnot. But like if there was a way to do that, I would rather have Christian Brown than some of the guys in the back end of LA's rotation. But again, you are taking on a questionable contract. So I'm making the case for it. I'm not for it necessarily, but I'm making the case for it. Tan-Man notes, thank you for the super chat. Bucks went down 0-2 at home and won the finals. Great point, and that would be the precedent here. So it's I think San Antonio is going to win at least a game, if not a couple, but I would say that the Knicks are clearly the favorites moving forward and almost certainly going to win the series. And then next one from Kristen Lee. Thank you for the super chat. Suns media thinks good one, maybe sacrifice due to cap issues. What would Lakers need to pay him? He would be a great bench guy to add depth and defense. I wonder if he would be available for the room exception, like comparing him to Luke Kennard. I think I'd rather just have Goodwin based on, I mean, Goodwin I think has developed as a shooter. He's not Luke Kennard as a shooter, right? But I mean, if you're replacing Luke Kennard, it's almost certainly going to be a shooting downgrade. So that is a given that if you lose Luke Kennard and you add anyone else, it's going to be a shooting downgrade. But between the rebounding, the defense, the toughness, the physicality, like all the intangibles that we've seen, even some short roll guard to guard playmaking from Jordan Goodwin, I think he is the type of bench player you would want on this team. So I do wonder if the room exception would be enough. I don't think he'd have a market much more than that. Like, I don't think he's a full non-taxpayer MLE guy. Maybe someone is interested in him at like 10 to 12 million, but I think that would be on the high side for him. So somewhere, to me, he's like an $8 to $12 million per year guy, depending on your cap situation, depending on the role for him. I could see somebody talking themselves into like 3/4 of the non-taxpayer MLE, but not the full thing. But I really like Goody. I think it was a giant mistake that the Lakers let him go, and I would definitely welcome him back if I'm LA. Kristen notes Suns media was talking about him getting $6 million from the Suns. I mean, if it's that low, if I'm wrong, then and it's that low, then definitely. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. You would have to use the room exception or cap space on him in that situation. But yeah, I mean, especially if it's Luke at 9 or 10 versus Goodwin at 6, I would definitely take Goodwin. But I think it's to me, he's more of an $8 to $12 million guy. And Two Sizzle asks, would you want to see DA next to Joker? Oh, I don't think they'd play a too big look, but I think he'd be an upgrade over, clear upgrade over Jonas Valanciunas as a backup. And then Kristen Lee, it'll be interesting to see if Rui gives the Lakers a hometown discount if the Spurs try to sign. I feel like the Lakers are good for Rui's brand internationally and in Japan. I guess Wemby helps with reach. Rui would be like, I've often used OKC and Minnesota as examples of the optimal build around Rui, but you could, definitely throw in San Antonio as now him versus Champagny is interesting because I actually think Champagny is a better player because he's a better defender. And I think he is actually he's a better rebounder. He's a better defender. Rui's a better shooter, but Champagny, I think takes and makes some pretty tough contested threes. So I don't even know if he would necessarily go in there and start. I think it would be potentially even in a bench role. It would be between him and Champagny. But regardless, I think what I made the case for with Rui's fit in like OKC or Minnesota is if you have a Gobert and I think Rui needs to be in a situation where he's the worst front court defender. And with the Lakers, he's often been in a situation where they're trying to make him the best front court defender. And I just think it's a misuse of his skill set. So if he was in OKC or Minnesota, you're surrounded by Chet, J-Dub, Hartenstein, Dort, Caruso. Minnesota, you're surrounded by Gobert and McDaniels. San Antonio, you're surrounded by Wemby and Castle and Harper and all these guys that I think it would be a natural fit for Rui. So yeah, I think he'd be a great fit in San Antonio. It's just, for Lakers, I think there's limitation there, at least with the current roster. And then final one here from Tan Man. Thank you for the super chat. Herb, Misi, and Goodwin would be a good offseason for LA. I agree. I think Misi, I don't know if I'm lower on Misi than people, but like I just think about, I'm looking at everything through the lens of could you have played in that OKC San Antonio series, and could you play right now in this San Antonio New York series, right? Because if the goal for the Lakers, it's not to have a better second round showing next year, right? The goal is get to the conference finals and beat one of these juggernauts. You might have to beat two of them along the way, and then get to the finals and beat the Knicks. Or if someone beats the Knicks along the way, it's like the Pacers bounced back, the Celtics made some moves, whatever the case is of who's coming out of the East. Like I'm looking at everything through that lens of can you play against really, I think the three best teams in the league right now, which is New York, San Antonio, OKC in some order. And I think Herb could. I think Goodwin could in a minor bench role. To me, the jury's still out on Misi. Now, he's still very young. He showed a lot of potential his rookie year that did not necessarily translate to his sophomore campaign, but I don't know that. Could he do better than Luke Cornett? Maybe. I don't know, but he's not as good as Mitchell Robinson. Is obviously not as good as Cat or Wemby. So it's like, it's just, I think people are projecting this. Now, I think with Luka, like some of the stuff offensively, like in looking at all the big men that are potentially available this offseason, it really stands out that the rim percentage for DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes, they have the two highest rim field goal percentages in the league or among that group. And they also have career highs in rim field goal percentage this year. And a big part of that was the embarrassment of riches they had between Luka, LeBron, and Austin in terms of playmaking. So I think there's a lot of centers that would look great in the Lakers system. Like DeAndre Ayton is not a natural lob threat. The Lakers eventually turned him into that. Misi or some of these other guys I think would look great in LA system next to Luka, next to LeBron, next to Austin. So I think he looked better offensively, but in terms of defense and rebounding, I don't know if he's quite up to that level of what the Lakers would need. So that's my one. Like, I guess the more I think about it, I mean, I still contend that they need both a legit two-way wing and a center, but I think the center spot we're seeing between Cat, Wemby, Chet, and Hartenstein. Like Chet had a terrible series against Wemby, but he kicked the Lakers' ass. He was important in their run to the conference finals. Like, you need a certain caliber of center. You're not getting by with the DeAndre Ayton, Jackson Hayes. I don't think you're getting by with the Robert Williams, Mitchell Robinsons. I think you need a legit starting center, like 20 plus million guy. And that is the challenge. Or, Wemby's a $10 million guy, but he's obviously one of the best players in the league. So Lakers got to find that, in my opinion. But we will touch on that in the coming days and weeks. Appreciate you guys. Shout out to the chat. I'll be back on Monday with an offseason overview. I'm going to, just like I did last year, go through the Lakers cap situation, go through their assets, go through their roster, and do an overarching breakdown of the pathways they can take over the cap, under the cap, and how LeBron fits into that, how Austin fits into that, how their center and wing pursuit fits into all this. So be on the lookout for that. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the Late Night Gang for those watching on YouTube. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back Monday. I'll talk to you all then.